I never expected that staying late at the office would lead to anything other than a few more emails and maybe a headache. But when my boss closed the door behind us and gave me that look, I realized this night wasn't going to be about work at all. From the very first day I walked into that building, something about him drew me in, something quiet, magnetic, and just a little dangerous. At first, I thought it was just admiration, a natural reaction to someone in charge. But now, months later, I couldn't deny it was more than that. Still, I never let it show. He was my superior, and I had every reason to keep my distance. What would you do if your late night at the office took an unexpected turn? Tell us in the comments. Your engagement helps the video grow, and we appreciate it so much. His name was Richard, and he was everything a department head should be. Sharp, collected, intimidating in the boardroom, yet always fair. At 46, he had a presence that commanded attention without ever raising his voice. He wore his gray suits like armor, crisp and tailored. His salt and pepper hair always neat. His gaze steady but unreadable. I was 38, a little younger, newer to the company, working in client strategy, still trying to prove myself. But Richard had noticed me early on, and not just in a professional way. The way his eyes lingered on me a little longer than necessary during meetings. The small smirks when we passed each other in the hallway. The soft, nearly imperceptible warmth in his voice when he said my name. I told myself I was imagining it, projecting desire where there was none, but deep down, I felt the quiet pull between us building every time we shared the same space. That night, the office was almost empty. A soft rain tapped the windows as I sat at my desk, finishing a presentation I had promised to revise before Monday. Most of the lights had already been turned off, leaving only the low hum of computers and the sound of my fingers tapping against the keyboard. I hadn't even realized Richard was still in the building until I heard his door creak open. "Evan," he called, his voice smooth and low. "Can I see you in my office before you head out?" I froze for a second, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 7. Everyone else had gone home. I swallowed my nerves and stood, smoothing my shirt as I crossed the quiet floor. The door was slightly ajar, and he was behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He looked different like this, relaxed but focused. His eyes followed me as I stepped in, and when he spoke, there was a slight edge to his voice I hadn't heard before. "Close the door." I did. The click of it behind me felt heavier than it should have. I stood there for a second, unsure, until he gestured to the chair in front of him. "Seat." I obeyed, trying to keep my breathing steady. He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me in silence for a few moments. Then he said, "You've been working hard lately. I noticed that." "Thank you," I replied quietly, meeting his gaze. "You don't just work hard," he continued, voice slower now. "You carry yourself differently, the way you think, the way you move through the team. I see it all." I wasn't sure how to respond. My throat was dry, my heart thudding as if it understood something I hadn't admitted yet. "I kept you here for a reason tonight," he said after a pause, his voice dropping just a little more. "Not because of the project." I looked up, and the way his eyes locked onto mine stole the breath from my lungs. There was no pretense in his face now, no formality, no mask. Only something real, something dangerous, something I wanted. "I thought maybe," Richard added softly, his tone tentative now, as if he too was finally stepping out from behind something. "You felt it too." I couldn't speak for a moment. All I could do was nod because I had felt it every day since the beginning. Then, slowly, carefully, he stood and came around the desk. He reached out, brushing his fingertips along the back of my hand, and that one simple touch was enough to send a wave of heat through my body. "I've waited," he murmured, eyes never leaving mine. "Longer than I should have." I stood up slowly, facing him fully now. "So have I." And in that stillness, in the quiet hush of the office long after hours, Richard leaned in and kissed me. Gently at first, as if unsure whether I would pull away. But I didn't. I kissed him back, letting years of held-back desire rise up all at once. His hands slid behind my neck, fingers threading into my hair as the kiss deepened. our bodies pressed close together between his desk and the soft lamplight. It was tender and charged all at once, a release of something we both had tried to suppress for too long. The office, the title, the rules, they all faded away in that moment. And as his arms wrapped around me fully and our kiss grew more urgent, I knew the night was just beginning. Richard's hands were steady as they slid along my back, the warmth of his touch seeping through the fabric of my shirt like a slow-burning fire. The kiss between us had deepened, grown heavier, and the office around us, once a space of hierarchy and rules, was now thick with heat, tension, and the quiet unraveling of something long denied. He pulled back just slightly, his forehead resting gently against mine, both of us catching our breath. His voice, low and rough with restraint, filled the silence. "Tell me to stop now, and I will." I looked up at him, at those familiar eyes that had watched me for months from across meeting tables and office corridors. There was no hesitation left in me, not after the way he had kissed me, not after the way my body responded to his. "I don't want you to stop," I whispered, meaning every word. Richard studied my face a second longer, then gently took my hand and led me to the small leather couch at the corner of his office. Less formal than the desk, more intimate. We sat down slowly, close but still slightly unsure, as if both of us were aware we'd crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed. "I've tried to stay professional," he said, brushing his fingers along the inside of my wrist in soft, tender circles. "But there's something about you, Evan. I feel it even when you're not in the room." His confession made my chest tighten in the best way. "It's been the same for me," I admitted quietly. "I thought I was just imagining it for the longest time." Richard gave a low, breathy laugh, almost like relief. "You weren't." His hand moved up my arm slowly, his fingertips skimming over the fabric until they reached my shoulder, then my neck. His palm settled there gently as he leaned in again, this time kissing me slower, with more care. This kiss wasn't rushed or desperate. It was deliberate, exploratory, filled with unspoken words. His lips moved with a softness that surprised me, like he'd been thinking about this moment long before it ever happened. I leaned into it, letting myself melt into the warmth of his mouth, the gentle weight of his hand, the way his body angled toward mine protectively but with need. When he pulled back this time, it was to look into my eyes. "I want to take my time with you," he said quietly. "You deserve that." The words sent a chill through me, not just desire, but something deeper. I reached up to touch his jaw, letting my fingers trace the stubble there before sliding down to the collar of his shirt. I began to unbutton it slowly, carefully, watching his expression the whole time. He didn't stop me. He just watched with a soft, unreadable look in his eyes, like he was still trying to believe this was real. When I leaned in to press my lips to the base of his throat, just above his collarbone, I felt him exhale sharply, his hands tightening around my waist. His mouth found my neck in response, leaving slow, lingering kisses along the skin just below my ear, each one making my breath catch. Soon, shirts were off and tossed to the side, and the warmth of our bare chests meeting sent sparks up my spine. Richard's hand moved across my back, strong but tender, holding me in a way that made it feel like more than just lust. It felt like release, like something long overdue. There was no rush, no fumbling, just the slow unfolding of two men finally letting go of the roles they'd held onto for too long. The couch creaked softly beneath us as we shifted closer, exploring the comfort and heat of each other's skin. Kisses deepened, fingers traced paths that felt familiar and new all at once, and breathing grew heavier as we pressed together, connected not just by want, but by something that felt dangerously close to trust. As Richard gently laid me back, his hands exploring every inch of my torso, he whispered softly against my mouth, "Stay with me tonight. Don't go home." I nodded, heart pounding in my chest, lips brushing his. I wasn't planning to, and in the quiet after hours of the office, with city lights casting soft reflections on the window glass, we let ourselves fall. The office had grown darker, the only light coming from a desk lamp casting long, golden shadows across the room. Outside the wide windows, the city hummed quietly in the distance, unaware of what was unfolding in one small corner of a high-rise building. Richard and I lay together on the leather couch, our clothes scattered near the desk, our breathing still uneven from everything that had just happened. His hand rested on my chest, rising and falling with each breath, his fingertips moving absent-mindedly across my skin. There was something incredibly tender about the way he touched me now, less urgency, more presence, like he wasn't just touching my body, but anchoring himself to this moment, to me. "I didn't plan this," Richard said finally, his voice low and steady, breaking the silence without disrupting it. "Not tonight. Not like this." I turned my head toward him, taking in the softened lines of his face. "Neither did I replied. "But I'm not sorry it happened." He let out a quiet breath, then nodded.
"No."
"Me neither." A comfortable silence settled between us. Not awkward, just thoughtful. I could feel the weight of what had happened starting to settle in. Not regret, but awareness. The kind that made you realize how thin the line was between two different worlds. What we'd had before tonight, and what we'd stepped into now. "This doesn't change what happens tomorrow," Richard said eventually, his hands still resting over my heart. "We still have our roles. The office. People watching." I nodded, understanding completely. "But it changes this. Right now. This is real." He looked at me then, his gaze sharper, more focused. There was vulnerability behind it, the kind that only shows itself when you've just given someone a piece of yourself you can't take back. "Yeah," he murmured. "It really does." We shifted slightly, pulling each other in closer. He kissed my forehead, then my temple, his lips lingering there like he needed the closeness as much as I did. I ran my hand along his shoulder, the solid strength of him somehow grounding me. For a man who spent his days giving orders, managing deadlines, and never letting a crack show in his armor, he was incredibly gentle when he held me, like he'd been waiting for a reason to let someone see who he was beneath it all. "What happens now?" I asked, quietly, my voice barely more than a breath. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the thin throw blanket folded over the side of the couch and draped it over us, then pulled me closer so that my head rested against his chest. "We figure it out," he said simply. "We don't rush it, but we don't pretend this didn't happen." The simplicity of his answer eased something in me. I wasn't looking for promises. I wasn't expecting declarations. But hearing that, knowing he wasn't about to pretend, was enough. As the minutes passed and the night settled deeper around us, we stayed there. Two men in a quiet office, wrapped in something neither of us had words for yet. Maybe we didn't need them, because even in silence, the message was clear. The morning came too fast. I woke to the faint sound of a streetcar in the distance and the soft shift of movement beside me. For a brief second, I forgot where I was. Then I turned my head and saw Richard, still asleep, one arm draped over me, the light from the window painting soft lines across his face. He looked younger when he slept, softer, the weight he carried as a department head, the constant sharpness in his expression. It was all gone in that moment, replaced by something peaceful. Watching him, I felt an ache I hadn't expected. The ache of wanting something that couldn't fit neatly into real life. I stayed there for a few more minutes, memorizing the feeling of his skin against mine, the warmth of the office-turned bedroom, the calm before the day would demand we return to who we were supposed to be. When Richard finally stirred, he blinked slowly, then turned toward me with a small, sleepy smile. "You stayed. You asked me to." He nodded once, his hand finding mine beneath the blanket, fingers curling around mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment it was. But the clock on the wall reminded us both that the world didn't stop just because we had. It was Monday. People would be arriving soon. Desks would fill, meetings would begin, and whatever this was would have to be folded carefully back into something unspoken. We dressed slowly, wordlessly, the mood shifting gently as we returned to reality. As I buttoned my shirt, I glanced at Richard across the room. He looked different again, composed, back in control. But I saw the difference in his eyes when he looked at me. It was subtle, but it was there. "About this morning," I said, slipping my watch onto my wrist. "Should we talk about it?" Richard paused, then walked over to me, resting a hand lightly on my hip. "Yes, but not now. Not here." I nodded, relieved. "Okay. I'm not brushing it off, Evan. I just need to handle things one step at a time." "I get it." Before either of us could say more, we heard the soft echo of footsteps in the hallway, the first signs of life returning to the office. The spell between us faded into something more restrained, though not less meaningful. Richard stepped back, adjusting his collar, slipping on the final piece of his armor. But before he opened the door, he looked back at me, his voice soft and private. "Whatever this is, we'll find a way." Then the door opened, and just like that, we were boss and employee again. Professional, composed. But beneath the surface, something had shifted, and it wasn't going away. Not after a night like that. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope. On the surface, nothing had changed. Meetings went on as usual, emails flew back and forth, and Richard and I returned to our roles. Him as the composed, strategic head of the department, and me as the eager, capable subordinate. But beneath the quiet buzz of the office, something new simmered between us. Unspoken but undeniably present. We kept our distance during work hours.
No lingering glances.
No secret smiles. If anyone suspected anything, they didn't show it. But every time we passed each other in the hallway, every time our hands brushed when exchanging a folder, I felt it. That gentle pull, the weight of memory and desire still lingering from that night on the couch. It wasn't just physical. It was everything in between. The way his eyes searched mine in moments of quiet. The softness in his voice when he called me into his office. The small, thoughtful notes he started leaving in my inbox. Nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate, but each one more personal than the last. "You handled that presentation perfectly. I'm proud of you. You've grown into this role faster than anyone I've worked with." Those messages carried more weight than they should have, because I knew they came from somewhere deeper than just professionalism. We didn't talk about what had happened that night. Not directly, but on Friday, as I was gathering my things to leave, my phone buzzed with a message. "You free after work?" It was from Richard. My heart jumped a little, but I kept my face still. I typed back quickly, "Yes." 30 minutes later, after everyone else had filtered out, I knocked on his door. He opened it slowly, his face relaxed in a way I hadn't seen all week. The tie was gone. His sleeves were rolled again. He motioned me in. "Lock the door." I did. The moment it clicked shut, the air between us changed. "I've missed you this week," Richard said, moving toward me. "Even just talking. This pretending, we needed it, I know. But it's not easy." I stepped closer, our bodies inches apart now. "I know. I felt it too." There was a pause. Then he reached up and touched the side of my face with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "Are you still with me in this?" "Yes," I whispered without hesitation. "Are you?" He nodded, and when he kissed me, it wasn't hungry or rushed. It was grounding, like we were both reminding each other this was real, that what we had wasn't just about what happened that night. It was about the space we had found in each other. We spent that evening not tangled on a couch, but talking, close, honest, real. And when he reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together, I knew he wasn't just my boss anymore. He was something more. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I found myself standing in Richard's apartment for the first time. The walls were lined with books and framed art, the space warm and carefully lived in. Like him, reserved, elegant, thoughtful. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to me, and for the first time in weeks, there were no office walls between us.
No locked doors.
No schedules or pretense. Just him and me. We sat close on the couch, our legs touching, the city murmuring outside his windows. His hand rested on my knee, thumb moving in small, steady circles. A silent rhythm that felt more intimate than anything we'd done behind closed doors. "Do you ever worry," I asked gently, "about what happens if this gets out?" Richard was quiet for a moment, then turned to look at me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. Of course, he admitted. It's complicated. The company, the people, the expectations. But I worry more about not giving this a real chance. I let his words settle in me. For all his calm, Richard had always been cautious, controlled, and yet here he was choosing something uncertain because it felt right. I don't want to live my life hiding, he added, almost to himself. Not anymore. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his, grounding us both. Then we won't, I said quietly. Not forever. He leaned in, kissing me gently, and this time it wasn't a kiss of hunger or escape. It was one of quiet promise. We stayed like that, curled into each other, letting the hours pass without rush. The next day, we returned to work, side by side but apart again, at least on the surface. But we knew what we had built behind the scenes. We knew what it meant when his hand brushed mine by accident, or when I stayed a few minutes longer after meetings, just to look at him a little more. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple, but it was ours. And no matter what happened next, we had already crossed the line where pretending wasn't enough. Because once you let someone in, really in, there's no going back. Only forward. Together.